Okay, so when it comes to trend analysis, they say that one of the easiest ways to defeat any type of monitoring system is to go low and slow. Now, how this helps the attacker is that most of the monitoring systems today create a ton of false alarms initially, and each alarm requires somebody and their time to investigate what's going on. If I'm able to slow things down or use what they refer to as a sparse attack, these types of attacks work because typically the sensitivity of security software gets turned down to try to reduce the false positives that you might be experiencing, or because actions are buried within they refer to as the noise generated by the number of alerts. Now, an attacker could also launch diversionary attacks to kind of conceal his target. Trend analysis gives us the ability for us to defend against sparse attack techniques. It actually makes us change the way we think, or it should. A great example of this is the fact that botnets used to use IRC as a command and control mechanism. Security researchers, security professionals realized that they were doing this and began to create rule sets for their devices, their software, their appliances that were able to stop these types of attacks. Well, what ended up happening? The attackers just simply stopped using IRC and started using SSL tunnels. So we mentioned before that when we have our data in front of us, and again, a lot of our data comes from devices or software or security procedures that we're already implementing, whether they're log files or, again, your IPS or your IDS systems. So if we change our thinking and looking at these different logs, these different resources available to us, we can look at this in a different viewpoint so that we can say, wait a minute, what about this? What if this is what's really happening? So what type of analytics should we actually be taking a look at? Well, there's several of them out there. So the first one you should actually be looking at would be what we refer to as data exfiltration. This is where data is leaving your environment with or without your knowledge. Now, based off of the previous 20 years of being hooked into the internet, we know that there's a inbound-outbound ratio of traffic. Typically, it's a 6-to-1 ratio, meaning that we intake more than we put out, basically. If we start to see some analytics that shows more data is leaving than coming in, that might be a good flag that something's going on. Now, this type of analytic you should actually be viewing almost daily, just so that you can kind of see if that ratio is changing on you. Now, if your business is providing data to individuals or as a service, then you would want to whitelist that type of information, and then you'd be left over with what they refer to just standard web surfing traffic. And if you start to see some out of whack ratios going on, like a 2-to-10 ratio, then you're probably giving up some data somewhere. And of course, that's the worst case scenario for us, right? Losing our data. Now, another analytic that you should probably be taking a look at would be actually DNS. DNS is obviously an extremely popular protocol, and almost everybody is allowing DNS to go out, right? Out to the internet. The problem here is that we can use covert channels of DNS to transmit information. Now, one of the ways that you can actually detect if this is being done is start looking for hosts within your internal network and seeing if they're using any type of external DNS. In particular, I would really look at those high-valued assets to see if they're configured to use external DNS systems. Now, another analytic that you should be looking at this is an obvious one, but it deals with our blacklists. A lot of companies subscribe to blacklist services. Whether it's the appliance may have it built into it as a feature, or you could be using an external service as well. These blacklists, are just simply IP addresses of known bad boys, right? And you need to be reviewing those to see if you are being connected to those types of hosts. This could actually be monitored very easily if you're using something like Cisco's NetFlow or any type of flow type connectors or technology. I think Juniper makes one that's called JFlow. There's also 3Com, Dell HP, they use something called S-Flow. Another avenue that you could take also is when you're looking at these IP addresses is not necessarily bad guys, but are any of the IPs that you're communicating with IP addresses from countries that your business doesn't deal with. Now, this can be kind of hard when it comes to dealing with cloud services because sometimes your data is being stored, in different data centers. But you should be able to very quickly determine if, that IP address belongs to Microsoft or Amazon or any of the cloud providers that are out there. Another analytic that you may want to take a look at is email campaigns or email attachment campaigns. This is where there's actually some services out there that'll do this for you, that will send emails to see if you can be tricked, or your users can be tricked into opening up attachments. The attachments themselves aren't really destructive or harmful in any way, but it creates analytics that you can then use in the training environment. So you can say, look, we have a high influx of people who want to double click on any type of email attachments that talks about Dale in a bathing suit. No, trust me, you don't want to click on that one. Now, one thing when doing these types of campaigns, make sure you understand that once you start one up, a lot of people will start talking, that old water cooler talk. So, attack different departments at different times or different individuals at different times, so nobody knows when it's actually going to come at them. So another type of analytics that you should be looking at would be the things that we talk about almost, it feels like we talk about this all the time, right? Malware and our malware detection systems. Well, here's the issue is that a lot of times we might not have 100% coverage on our network. And this could be for several reasons. It could be, that we're just getting started up with a particular vendor, or we may have a budget issue. Being able to actually use this analytic and saying, hey, look, we're starting to get attacks in these different areas can actually end up helping you in the long run. You can actually say, hey, look, I know that we're tight on budget, but guess what? This malware is starting to affect systems in this particular department or this particular division that we haven't deployed to yet. And if anything, this analytic can actually give you ammunition to go back again to management and say, hey, we really need to accelerate this process if we want to be protected. Another analytics that we should be focused in on is actually looking at literature review. Meaning that when new products come out or updates, or especially on the mobile platform, when somebody comes up with a new update for their product, you need to really scour the documentation, making sure that nothing has been changed that could adversely affect what you are currently trying to do in your environment. I would also apply this obviously to things like appliances, switches, routers, even laptops or desktop machines. Hey, maybe we should have a computer book club.